Video game movies suck. And I don't think that's a hot take. I think that's just generally accepted at this point. The highest rated video game adaptation movie on Metacritic as of right now is a movie called Werewolves Within. Now, if you're saying, what the heck is that, my guy? Don't feel embarrassed. This movie made less than $1 million at the box office, so you're not alone in not being tuned in here. Even the game it's based on, which is also called Werewolves Within, I've never heard of it. But nonetheless, this is the highest critically rated movie that we have, and it's sitting at a whopping 66. The second highest rated movie is 1995's Mortal Kombat, sitting at a 60. Now, you're not going to hear any Mortal Kombat slander from me. I enjoy that movie, but if that's considered to be the second best video game movie of all time by the critics, I think we might have a problem, right? Over the last decade, there's been tons of video game adaptations popping up left and right, from Uncharted to Borderlands, Assassin's Creed, Need for Speed. They keep on coming, and people keep on disliking them. Now, some of them have released to massive financial success, like the Mario and Sonic movies. Others of these, not so much. Tough break to the Monster Hunter fans. Hollywood has been on this trend for a long time now of using already established IPs to capitalize in the movie space. I mean, it's easier to sell characters people already love than it is to gamble on making people fall in love with new ones. Established IPs get butts in seats, and that's all they care about after all. But why hasn't this worked from a reception perspective? Out of the dozens of video game adaptations we've gotten, why is the best we could do a 66 Metacritic score? Why have video games not gotten a masterpiece yet? And taking it even deeper, why are video game movies failing where video game shows seem to be succeeding? Why do critics love stuff like The Last of Us and Arcane? What do those do that movies either aren't doing or can't do? Hi, I'm Roman, and you're watching What the Fuck Ever. Before we get there, we got to talk about the storytelling in video games and how it's changed throughout the years. To me, there's been two critical moments in gaming that played a direct influence in where we are today as far as narrative work in games. The first one is the original Metal Gear Solid, which most of us understand by now. Metal Gear Solid was really the first time a game felt like a Hollywood spectacle. It felt like watching an action movie. And there's no need for me to spend a bunch of time here. There's plenty of content out there talking about Metal Gear's influence. But the second moment was the work of Naughty Dog. This is where, in my opinion, the foundation that was laid out by Kojima and Metal Gear was then expanded even further to give us full-fledged, truly cinematic feeling experiences in games. Games like The Last of Us and Uncharted 4 felt like interactive movies. The techniques that they use to introduce, flesh out, and progress character stories feel like they're copied right out of a movie director's handbook. Games had been telling great stories prior to this, right? BioShock is some of my favorite narrative work ever. But what Naughty Dog did in that era was combine great storytelling with movie theater experiences, making games feel like cinema. And some people will argue that that was for the worst, right? There's people out there that hate the movie-fication of games. And now we've got games coming out with 50 hours and cutscenes. It has gotten a little crazy, and Naughty Dog did play a big part in that. But I do think those games also catapulted forward the idea of games being more artistic than what a lot of people were giving them credit for prior. And since then, we have gotten incredible worlds. Some of the most iconic characters in all of gaming have come in the past 10 years or so, where they're no longer becoming iconic just because of the franchise being fun, but because we've been allowed to grow an attachment to them, because these characters are no longer just a thing we control as we play, and we now get to really understand these characters on a deeper level, the same as you would a character in a book or a movie. This has given us the opportunity to gain a different level of appreciation for them. So if we have this medium that allows for such rich storytelling, why isn't it translating? Why does everyone love Nathan Drake and the adventures he goes on in the game world, but the movie, not so much? So first off, there's two types of video game adaptations out there. You got the movies that are based on story-rich games. These would be your Uncharted or Warcraft. And then there's movies that are based on games that are not known for narrative work. This would be stuff like the Minecraft movie or Rampage or Mario. Now, because those style of games are not narrative focused, the movie adaptations have to do a lot of the heavy lifting there to create story. They're basically just taking the core concept of a character in a world and building all of this story and lore around it, which in itself is a difficult task to pull off. But even more than that, it's creating a vibe that has nothing to do with why that game is loved in the first place. When you're making a movie about Minecraft, you have to tell a story from beginning to end. That's the purpose that movies serve. But Minecraft isn't the beloved game it is because of its narrative. It's simply just because people enjoy the gameplay loop, something that's missing in a movie experience. So you're trying to appeal to an audience of something by selling them on an aspect that they don't necessarily care about for that IP. To me, it makes sense why adaptations of this style don't succeed from a critical standpoint, because those movies aren't necessarily meant to be some artistic masterpiece. Those kind of movies are something you bring your kids to so they can see their favorite characters on the big screen. As Martin Scorsese puts it, these are theme park movies. They're just turn your brain off kind of fun. It's the other style of games that I think are worth talking about here. The games that have these incredible stories, these expansive worlds and interesting characters. Why does it seem like no matter how many attempts we get, movie directors just can't seem to knock one out the park? Now, one of the first reasons, in my opinion, is limitations. Movies have the ability to tell great stories. I know there's purists out there that live by the idea that books are always better than movies, but I actually don't agree. I enjoy movies way more because of their ability to put so much information and story out instantaneously. In a book, every single little detail has to be written about extensively so that you can create a mental picture of the scene. The tone in that room, how everything appears, the emotions of the characters. In a movie, you get 3 seconds of frame and you've now got all of that same information with the added benefit of it being visually there without you having to paint the picture yourself. What can take a book a few pages to describe, a movie can do at the snap of a finger. And I know the bookworms like the imagination of it all, being able to visualize things how they want rather than having someone paint it for them. But to me, movies have always been a more efficient and stimulating way for a story to be given to me. But you only get so much time. See, a book can be 2,000 pages long, and as long as your story is interesting, people are going to keep reading it. A movie, though, everything is condensed. Anything longer than 3 hours and people are already getting a little impatient. I mean, 2 hours is pushing it for some people. You're limited in how much time you have to get your story out there. You get a couple of hours to cram as much narrative in there as you can. And when you're dealing with already established properties, it's hard, like really hard. The reason why something like Lord of the Rings is such an anomaly in filmmaking isn't just because it's a very good movie, but it's also because it was able to properly represent one of the most iconic book series ever. The Tolkien books are some of the deepest lore in fiction with so much to learn and understand. For the longest time, it was thought to be impossible to actually bring that world to the big screen. Peter Jackson doesn't have the greatest catalog of movies. There's some okay stuff in there and there's some duds, by no means the most impressive. But the fact that he made the Lord of the Rings movies that he did automatically puts him into a special tier of elite directors. Now granted, he broke them up into 3 separate movies that were pushing like 3 hours each, and he was also forced to leave tons of details out that were in the book, but nonetheless, he made it happen. He properly represented a book that was thought to be impossible. Denis Villeneuve is currently in the process of doing something similar with the Dune series. This is another one that nobody wanted to touch for decades. One of the best sci-fi stories ever, the inspiration behind almost all modern sci-fi, and no one had the balls to make it into a movie. Why? Because there was so much story to cram into such a short medium. And in my opinion, Denis pulling it off. The Dune movies are some of the best sci-fi stuff I've ever watched. These examples are exceptions though. These weren't supposed to work on paper. These were right guy, right place, right time. Movies can be great tools for storytelling, especially when you're planning a series of movies that blend together. But when you're dealing with a singular movie, those stories have to typically be much smaller in scale. If Peter Jackson tried to cram the entirety of Lord of the Rings into one movie, it would have been a disaster. The medium just doesn't allow for that level of detail in that time. Now, movies like Goodfellas or Shawshank or E.T., these are interesting and engaging stories that are also much smaller in their approach to the scale. Movies that you could describe their entire plot in just a couple of sentences. That's where a one-off movie thrives. Smaller in scale ideas that give you plenty of extra time for character building, as opposed to massive in scale ideas that would take away from your ability to work any character development. And this is where video games come into the picture. Everyone loves Arthur Morgan. Commander Shepard, Nathan Drake. But we spend 50 hours, 100 hours with these guys. Video game stories today play out much more like a giant epic rather than a one-off movie. So how do you fit Shepard's 100-hour voyage across 3 games to save the universe into a 2-hour movie? And the answer is you don't, and you can't. Because even if you tried it, there's an incredible amount of detail that would have to be left out of every aspect. You're not going to spend nearly enough time learning about all these interesting characters and races and planets. The Uncharted movie, we've been with Nathan Drake for 4 games now, each of those being their own massive in scale story. If you wanted to really make an Uncharted movie, each game would need its own trilogy just to scratch the surface of even coming close to giving off a similar vibe. Outside of treasure hunting, nothing about that movie actually felt like the Uncharted games to me, because you can't give me an epic Nathan Drake treasure hunt in 116 minutes. And this is exactly why I think video game shows are always going to be a better option for an adaptation. With each episode being 40 minutes to an hour, a season having 10 to 15 episodes, and a show having 3 or so seasons, you get ample amounts of time to work on your story. You can really develop your characters and set tones and flesh out your worlds. BioShock's one of my favorite games of all time, and when I heard Netflix was making a BioShock movie, my initial reaction was hype, just because I always want more BioShock. But once the dust settled a little bit, the less I actually wanted it. 1, because it's Netflix, and 2, because it can't be done well. You can't take Ken Levine's world and properly transfer that into a 2-hour film. If you want to film that game, it has to be done as a TV series. But one of the biggest factors in why I think video game movies just aren't hitting like they should is because they're being treated like a gimmick. I think a lot of these production companies are looking at video game stories in the same way that they do the superhero stuff. The novelty to them is in the name and the characters, not in the story. So these companies who are interested in these games are saying, hey, this game's popular, let's make a movie. I don't feel like there's any due diligence to understand how interesting these worlds are. It's being viewed as a money grab. Look at the casting of this stuff. Oh, Minecraft is popular, let's throw Jack Black and Jason Momoa in there. I see this Uncharted game sold pretty well, we'll slap Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland on it and call it a day. And this isn't a diss to any of those guys, but it's pretty clear by this point that when a studio wants to do a video game movie, they just want to put whatever big names they can to fit the mold, because their thought process is Aquaman is going to sell more tickets than some random kid who's waiting on his first gig. These video game stories aren't being viewed as potential Oscar nominees, they're being viewed as paydays. The director choices are typically guys with below average to bad resumes. Most of the screenwriters for this stuff are guys who have yet to write a movie worth praising. And most of these guys ironically come from that IP farming world. These directors and writers for video game movies are usually the same guys who work on the superhero stuff and Transformers and Jurassic Park. All of these franchises that have been hoarded out for decades and milked for every ounce of content, those are the same guys getting these video game movie gigs. These are the film guys who are in the business of exploiting IPs, not really making art. It seems like we're pretty far off from ever seeing something like Mirror's Edge, the movie, directed by David Fincher, starring Rooney Mara. The creatives aren't being considered for this stuff, and it starts at the top. I feel like video game movies are just trying way too hard to be safe fun. Let's get all these fun actors, let's write a bunch of silly one-liners. Video game shows, they're just taking themselves way more serious, and you have to, because a lot of these worlds are dark and grim. In a world like The Witcher or Last of Us or Fallout, we don't need Marvel-style punchlines and plot armor for all the characters. Most of these video game stories aren't family-friendly, happily ever after fairy tales, and yet these adaptations are being made with mass appeal in mind. This is what I think, just to wrap all these thoughts up. If you're looking to make a video game adaptation, just do a show. It allows for way more freedom to explore narrative. But in a world where you absolutely want to make a video game film and you're looking to make the next all-time classic, first, pick your game. Something interesting, something with a deep world to explore. Deus Ex, the Metro series, give us something worth showcasing. Then, hire some real filmmakers. Not to say that these other guys aren't real filmmakers, but come on, get some directors and writers that have the resume that shows that they can take on challenges. Lastly, plan for a series. Like Lord of the Rings, like Dune, your first movie shouldn't be you blowing your load trying to stimulate the audience as much as possible. Learn the setting and set the tone for the premise of the story. If you're gonna successfully tell these stories, you gotta accept that this is a long-term investment, not some one-off gimmick. I think once we see that, maybe then we will finally get our video game movie magnum opus. But what do I know? I'm just a guy who likes to talk. Give me a kiss.